As an elementary teacher, you're often tasked with teaching your students how to read or getting them to fall in love with reading. And as technology increases and our students have more and more screen time, that can be hard to do. So in today's video, I want to talk to you about upper elementary book club ideas that are fun and educational for you and your students. Hi, I'm Molly, and I'm a 5th grade teacher who helps teachers just like you learn how to implement the Daily 5 in your elementary classroom so you can streamline your literacy block and get to all of your reading groups. Last week, I did a video that helped break down exactly how to run a Daily 5 book club. And now that I'm in 5th grade and I've moved out of kindergarten and 1st grade, I've gotten to read chapter books with my 5th graders. So I'm going to talk about engaging your students in upper elementary, 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade with chapter books. And not only that, I'm going to tell you how I do it and some of my favorite books. I'm going to give you a complete guide of books that you can look into after you're done watching the video. I love using chapter books at upper elementary for a variety of reasons. And I know different curriculums are going to exist and you might have different rules and regulations. So I'm just going to talk about what I've used in the past and how I tether it into the learning standards for 5th grade. And I found that in upper grades, our students really can dive into a chapter book as long as we're modeling that for them and giving them literature that is exciting to them and that they likely have never seen before. So I will sit down every time I'm starting a new book and go through all of the learning standards and decide what my students need to learn, and I'll tether those in to the actual lesson. I go back and I look through the curriculum and see what that part is teaching as well, so that I'm tying it all in. It all goes together with the whole group lesson, the word work lesson for the week. It's very comprehensive and it does take a little bit of extra time in the beginning, but once you do it for the entire school year, you have it all planned out and mapped out, so you don't have to keep reinventing the wheel unless you switch grade levels, which I've done before, so I get it. I also love picking older books. I think there's a lot of value in that because our students are so used to graphic novels now, which are great, but those aren't books I'm going to use for book club. So I like to go back way in time, a lot of times like 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s books, because my students now are so much younger than me that they don't know the books that maybe I grew up with or you grew up with. And they might look at the older cover and think, oh, this book is so old. What is she thinking? But then they start reading it and they really love it. And I've tested out all of the books I'm going to talk to you about today. I'm going to give you 5 really great examples, but just know that I have a whole curated list over on my Amazon storefront, and there's a bunch more on there. I just thought for the sake of time, 5 books would be great to start with, and you can go check out that list in the description box below at the end of this video. The first book I want to start with is The Mouse and the Motorcycle. Now, I can't remember off the top of my head when this book was written. I want to say the 60s or 70s. I'd have to flip through my own copy and see. I love the author, Beverly Cleary, and this book is great for so many reasons. 1, I've never had a student that's ever read it before, so that's cool. 2, they've all liked it. They've thoroughly enjoyed it. If we had a point where we had to stop and we couldn't continue reading until the next time or whatever in the book club, then kids were always like, oh, I want to read ahead. So this one, there is 3 other parts to this book, so you could have it as a series and keep reading with your students. I've done that as well. I think one is Ralph S. Mouse, and I can't think of the other one, but they're all on my storefront over on Amazon, so you can check that out. And this is probably one of my top favorite books to read personally. As a kid, I loved it, and my students do as well. Next is Tales of a 4th Grade Nothing. And just because 4th grade is in the title, it doesn't mean that it's just for 4th graders. I've read it with 3rd graders that I've been tutoring. I've read it with 4th graders that I've tutored. And then also in my 5th grade classroom, I've read this and my students really liked it. There's super funny parts, and the author Judy Blume is one of my favorites as well. And this one is also a series. Super Fudge, Fudge-A-Mania, I think is another one. There's a bunch in there. So some of them are listed as well on the storefront, and you could continue the series with your students and really build that love of reading and connection to text, and they can see themselves in the main character a lot of times, which is great. And the main character is a boy, so I like to balance sometimes who the main character is and what the problems they're struggling with, so I'm not always picking the same type of characters. Next, Hatchet. My students love this book by Gary Paulson. He was an amazing author, and his books are definitely older. I believe Hatchet was written in the 80s, and my students had never heard of it, but there was even a unit that involved talking about survival and the curriculum that I use, and it tied in perfectly. My students made so many text-to-text connections with the non-fiction text we were reading for that unit to the book Hatchet. So I highly recommend that. Again, it's a main character that they're not used to seeing, struggling with something that is pretty intense, but he's a very relatable character because his parents are going through a divorce. This opened up a lot of really great conversations in my classroom when we talked about this book together in our small group. One, because my parents are divorced, and that was something that I could share with my students and just get to open up to them because they wanted some empathy in those conversations as well, because when kids are sharing those sort of things, it's kind of neat to hear, oh, my teacher's been through that too. Oh, Brian, the main character, went through that, and this is what he had to deal with. So Hatchet, I highly recommend. There's other books that go along with this one too in a series, so you can continue reading with your students if they happen to love it. Next, The One and Only Bob by Katherine Applegate. This is such a great book because it's told from a cool perspective, and also the chapter lengths vary quite a bit, and your students will get really invested in the main characters. It also has a follow-up, The One and Only Ruby and The One and Only Ivan. So there are so many books in this series. She does a really great job and has a unique writing style that students might not be used to, but it might inspire them during Daily 5 work on writing to write similar type stories, which I've had students do that before and make that really cool connection, and getting to see that from reading something to putting pen to paper is really neat as a teacher. The last one I'm going to mention on the list is Holes by Louis Sekar, and my students love this book as well because they can really see themselves in the main character, but they also are so far removed from the struggles that he's dealing with in everyday life, but it's relatable. The friendships in the book are funny, but also tough, and the kids really enjoy getting to know the characters and the friendships. I can say that this book has always been exciting no matter when I've taught it as a book club book, so I hope that maybe it might be one that you like as well. Oftentimes students will say, oh, I've seen the movie. So that is a problem because it's a Disney Channel movie, but you can decide, okay, if too many people in this group have seen the movie, then probably we shouldn't read the book. But if nobody's seen it, then it works out perfectly. So those are my top 5 books right now on my list that I love teaching upper elementary with, but I've got more over on my Amazon storefront, like I mentioned to you, and you can check those out and click on any of them. A lot of them are really low cost because they're older. You can also go to your book room at school if you have one and look for all of these books. I just wanted to make a list for you in case you do buy things on Amazon, because I personally, the last couple of years, had to buy my own books, and I was okay with that because I was able to find them at cheap prices. But I've also worked at schools before that had these really comprehensive book rooms and had sets of books that I could just go grab. So it depends on what you have. But I would love to know in the comments below, do you have access to chapter books like this for Daily 5 Book Club, or do you have to purchase them on your own? Let me know. And again, the list is linked, and I appreciate you checking out anything on my Amazon storefront to help you in your classroom, and know that I get a little bit of a kickback from that, and you're helping your own students by building up your classroom library at the same time. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next week.